All right, Raiders Nation, let's get into it. Because it is actually, finally, for real happening. OTAs are up and running out in Las Vegas. And for the first time this offseason, we are getting actual, live, breathing footage of Fernando Mendoza dressed in silver and black, standing on a Raiders practice field and firing passes to Raiders receivers. Not highlight reels from his college days, not workout videos from some random gym, the real thing. And I'll be straight with you. Even from the handful of clips the team has put out so far, there is already a ton to unpack, a ton to get fired up about, and one conversation that is starting to take shape in a way that every single person who bleeds Raiders colors needs to be locked in on. So let's dig into everything we're seeing, everything we're hearing, and what the next few weeks of open OTAs, when the media gets full access and the real, unfiltered information starts pouring in, are going to reveal about where this quarterback battle is genuinely headed. The footage. Let's talk about what we're actually seeing. First things first, the footage itself. The Raiders dropped a couple of clips from these early voluntary sessions. And look, nobody is out here drawing sweeping, season-defining conclusions from a few throws in a non-contact, no-pads environment. That would be jumping the gun. But what you can assess, and what actually matters even at this early stage, is ball flight, throwing mechanics, and the overall feel of how a quarterback is moving and operating within the framework of the offense. And on every single one of those measures, Fernando Mendoza's throw is flat out gorgeous. I'm not throwing out empty hype here. The ball flight on his release is as clean and visually satisfying as anything I've seen from a young quarterback in recent memory, maybe longer. The spiral is tight, the trajectory is on a rope, and the timing of his delivery looks completely natural, almost casual, in a way that does not always make the jump from college to the pros looking this smooth on day one. A lot of guys arrive in the NFL and their mechanics tighten up, their release gets choppy, the pressure of the new environment shows up in their footwork. Mendoza, he looks like he belongs. He looks like he has always belonged. This kid carries natural throwing talent that jumps off the screen even in a brief workout clip. Now, Kirk Cousins also got his reps in, and the ball was perfectly fine. Accurate, catchable, clean. Everything you'd expect from a 14-year NFL veteran who has built an entire career on being technically polished and reliable. The throw he made to Dante Thornton was solid, clean, on time, exactly where it needed to be. No complaints. But if we're being completely real about the comparison, and I think we have to be, Mendoza's release and ball flight looked cleaner, looked more effortless, looked more like something you build an entire offense around for the next 10 years, rather than something that carries you competently through one more season before the clock runs out. There's a difference between a quarterback who is good and a quarterback who makes you feel something when the ball leaves his hand. Mendoza, even in these early clips, makes you feel something. The detail nobody is talking about, but everybody should be. Here's where I need to pump the brakes a little and keep it real with you, because honesty will always matter more than hype on this channel. Pay close attention to who these quarterbacks are throwing to in the early OTA clips, because it tells you something important about how the reps are being divided up. When you actually look at the footage, Cousins is getting his throws in with the starters. Dante Thornton, Trey Tucker, the established names in that receiver room. Mendoza is getting his reps too, but the distribution of who lines up across from whom in these early sessions is a data point absolutely worth tracking as OTAs push into their open media period. It's not alarming yet, it's early, it's voluntary, and everything can shift, but it's a thread worth pulling on. Don't let it slip past you. Kubak's dream scenario, and why it should make you a little nervous. Now let's have the real quarterback conversation, because a major development has surfaced from the comments Clint Kubak has been making publicly lately. The head coach has stated, and this part matters a lot, that his ideal vision, his best-case picture of how this season plays out, is one where the Raiders are in a spot to let Fernando Mendoza sit, watch and develop for a full year. Let that land for a second. The head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders is going on the record, saying his preferred outcome is Kirk Cousins under center, while Mendoza stands on the sidelines soaking it all in. I get the football reasoning behind it. I genuinely do. An RPO-heavy college quarterback making the switch to a pro-style West Coast system is a big adjustment. There's real developmental value in spending a full season next to a seasoned veteran who has run this exact system before. The daily learning environment, the chance to study NFL defenses at practice pace before facing them under live game pressure, the Tom Brady mentorship model. These are legitimate arguments. Patient development has worked before, but here's my honest counter, and I'm not backing down from it. What Kubak is calling his dream scenario is also the exact kind of organizational hesitation that has derailed talented young quarterbacks all throughout NFL history. The dream scenario where the veteran plays well enough to keep the rookie watching all season long is also, often, the scenario where you finish the year with a respectable but uninspiring record, zero real playoff traction, and a franchise quarterback who is a year older without a single snap of live game experience to show for it. Real growth at the quarterback position doesn't happen in a classroom. It happens when the lights are on and the crowd is loud and the pressure is real. The question I keep coming back to is this: patient development toward what, exactly? What is the destination that makes delaying the journey worthwhile? Here's the nuance that I think matters most. Kubak's position isn't crazy. If Cousins gives this team a real shot to win, if the Raiders are sitting at 4-4 or 5-3 at the midpoint of the season, running a functional offense, competing in every game, with a legitimate path to the postseason, then yeah, I can live with that. Cousins managing a winning football team while Mendoza absorbs, grows, and prepares is a real outcome worth respecting. That's not a bad situation. That's a team making smart decisions. But if this offense is stagnant, if the wins aren't coming, if the team is grinding through a frustrating go-nowhere season behind a quarterback who was never supposed to be the long-term answer in the first place, then the math changes completely, and Mendoza needs to be on that field, regardless of what the original plan said, regardless of what anybody's dream scenario looked like in May, what we will not accept. And I think this fan base needs to be completely locked in and unified on this, is a scenario where the Raiders sleepwalk through a mediocre season with a quarterback who was always a bridge and nothing more, while the guy who actually represents the future of this franchise watches from the sideline week after week, month after month, never getting his shot. That is the Cleveland scenario. That is the nightmare we have been talking about on this channel for months. And the early signs from OTAs, with Cousins getting first-team reps, you make that risk real enough to watch closely. The wide receiver room, where things could get really interesting. Let's pivot to the rest of the roster, because OTAs are giving us early reads on multiple position groups that deserve real attention heading into training camp. The wide receiver room is the group I'm watching most closely right now, specifically Jack Bash and Dante Thornton. These are the two players in that receiver core, with the most to gain from a strong OTA and training camp showing, and they're also the two whose development matters most for what this offense could become under Mendoza. Thornton's combination of size, speed, and the ability to create separation on vertical routes is the kind of thing you don't just manufacture. It's either there or it isn't, and with him, it's genuinely there. If he can add consistency on contested catches and back shoulder throws, and that's the precise kind of precision throw that Mendoza's delivery sets up absolutely beautifully, then Thornton stops being an intriguing prospect and starts being a legitimate big play weapon. The back shoulder connection between a precise quarterback and a long striding vertical receiver is one of the single hardest plays in football to defend when it's executed properly. And everything about Mendoza's touch and release suggests he can make that throw at a high level. Put those two together and defenses will lose sleep. The defense, under the radar and quietly scary. On the defensive side of the ball, the excitement level is genuinely elevated, and I don't think enough people are talking about it. Dean and Kwalker at linebacker is a pairing that has me fired up in a way I honestly didn't fully see coming. The athleticism is real, the range is impressive, and the ability to cover ground in both run defense and pass coverage gives this linebacker duo the kind of dynamic quality that could quietly become one of the most underrated strengths on this entire roster by week one. Don't sleep on these guys. Traden Stokes looks like he's tracking toward a day one starting role at nickel, especially with Taron Johnson's availability still uncertain. Given Stokes' versatility and his comfort covering multiple alignments in the secondary, that transition should be smooth. McCoy's health remains the variable I'm watching most carefully on the defensive side of the ball. If he is fully healthy and operational by training camp, you're potentially looking at a day one starting cornerback who was considered a first-round caliber talent before knee concerns pushed him all the way to the 4th round. If McCoy comes back right, this secondary gets significantly more dangerous. The combination of McCoy, Stokes, Dalton Johnson, and Hezekiah Masses in the back end gives this defense a legitimately deep group of coverage players. The competition for playing time across those spots is going to push every single one of them to perform at their absolute ceiling. And that kind of internal competition is exactly how good defenses are built. Kieran Crawford at edge is a name I want to see throughout these OTA sessions. With Tyreek Wilson gone and Malcolm Koonce on a short-term deal, Crawford has a real, wide-open opportunity to lock himself in as the clear number 2 edge rusher behind Max Crosby. Not just a rotational piece, but a genuine starter-level presence who makes this defensive front dangerous coming from both sides. He has the development arc on his tape that supports that kind of jump. OTAs are the first real chance to see whether that growth is continuing to accelerate in a professional setting. The trenches and everything else. The offensive line competition is another storyline absolutely worth following. DJ Glaze enters camp as the right tackle frontrunner with 31 consecutive starts on his resume. He's earned the first shot, and the coaching staff should give it to him. But the competition behind him, with Charles Grant and Trey Zunn both capable of playing multiple spots across that front 5, creates the kind of depth and adaptability that gives an offensive line real staying power over a full 17-game grind. Colton Miller at left tackle remains one of the most solid and quietly underappreciated building blocks on this entire roster. And the interior combination being assembled around him has the makings of something genuinely formidable. Cameron McGurran's addition at linebacker is exactly the kind of low-cost, high-upside move that a well-run front office makes before OTAs, spotting a need, identifying the right fit, and adding legitimate competition before the real battles begin. The Michigan connection to John Spanos makes it a natural landing spot, and the linebacker room behind Tommy Eichenberg and Cody Lenenberg needed exactly this kind of jolt of fresh competition and athleticism to keep everybody sharp. Where things stand right now. Here's where I land after taking in everything from these early OTA sessions. This roster is legitimately exciting. From the defensive front to the secondary to the skill positions on offense, the talent assembled in Las Vegas right now is real. The competition is genuine. The organizational vision that has been clear throughout this entire offseason is continuing to show up in the early details of how these practices are being structured and how the depth chart is starting to take form. The quarterback situation remains the one unresolved question that everything else rotates around. Kubak wants to develop Mendoza carefully. Mark Davis wants to see him on the field. The OTAs, the mandatory minicamp, and ultimately training camp are going to generate the information that pushes this decision toward a resolution, one way or the other. And I genuinely believe that if Mendoza performs the way his pre-OTA preparation has suggested he is capable of performing, the coaching staff is going to find it harder and harder, and eventually impossible, to justify keeping him parked on the sideline when the regular season kicks off. Watch the open OTA sessions carefully when the media gets full access. Watch who gets first-team reps. Watch how Mendoza moves in the pocket, how he processes coverage rotations, how quickly he finds his checkdowns when the primary red disappears. Watch whether Cousins is operating like a starting quarterback, actively building real chemistry, or like a veteran going through the motions of a role he already knows has a ceiling on it. The answers are on their way. Training camp is going to tell us everything we need to know. And Raiders Nation, based on everything I'm seeing from this roster right now, I am more confident than ever that we are watching the very beginning of something genuinely special being built in Las Vegas. Stay locked in.